Hey, what's up, guys? Today I want to talk about one of the new court docs that dropped where Ann Taylor is arguing the constitutionality of the execution and the death penalty there in Idaho, where she states that it's cruel and unusual punishment on Brian, especially with the lethal injection and also the firing squad. She said that the firing squad would be a lot more painful. And yeah, this is just another attempt to get the death penalty thrown off the table. Let's get into it, guys. Comes now, Brian C. Kohlberger, by and through his attorneys of record, hereby moves this court pursuant to the 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, 6, 7, 8, and 13 of the Idaho Constitution, and 7, Idaho Constitution 3, 5, and 1, and 7, and IC 18 4004, 19 3, 1301 1308, and 1409, and 1411, and 1418, and 192515 to strike the state's notice of intent to seek death penalty. This motion is made on the grounds that upon conviction and sentence of death, the process by which Mr. Kohlberger would be put to death in Idaho violates the 8th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution, as well as Article 1, Sections 6 and 13 of the Idaho Constitution. Number 1, constitutional limits on manner of execution, the history of executions in Idaho, and they go back to the Thomas Creech case because the first time they tried to execute him, it was a botch, and now they're going to try again on the anniversary of the Idaho 4. They're going to try to execute Thomas Creech on 11/13/2024 for the second time. Lethal injection in Idaho is not viable. The firing squad is not and was never constitutional. Proceeding with capital murder charges in this case is unconstitutional because executing Mr. Kohlberger by means of lethal injection or a gunshot, as conceived of and by the Idaho Department of Corrections, would violate his right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment and his right to due process under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. See Trope versus Dulles. It would also violate his right under Article 1, Section 6 and 13 of the Idaho Constitution. An execution procedure that involves the unnecessary and wanton infliction of pain violates the 8th Amendment. Sorry about that, was being loud in the kitchen. An execution procedure that involves the unnecessary and wanton infliction of pain violates the 8th Amendment, Gregg 428 U.S. and at 173. The 8th Amendment's prohibition is non static but is responsive to evolving standards of decency and contemporary values concerning the infliction of challenged sanction. Execution by lethal injection constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. Furthermore, the 14th Amendment guarantees that no person may be deprived of life, liberty, and or property without due process of law. And trust me, there is a lot of violating Brian's due process of law in this case. A violation of procedural due process requires a showing of 1. A constitutional protected interest of life, liberty, and or property. 2. Governmental deprivation of that right, and 3, constitutional inadequacy of challenge procedures affecting the deprivation. See Bank of Jackson Cry, our city, versus Cherry. A prisoner sentenced to death has a constitutionality protected interest in life that is not extinguished by the conviction and death sentence. See Ohio Adult Parole Authority versus Woodward. The manner of execution is set by the legislature in Idaho. IC 19-2716 was amended just last year. The new version of the statute is: the punishment of death shall be inflicted by the following methods: continuous intravenous administration of a lethal quantity of a substance or substances approved by the director of the Idaho Department of Corrections until death is pronounced by a coroner or a deputy coroner. Or B, firing squad. Not later than 5 days after the issuance of a death warrant, the director of the Idaho Department of Correction must determine and certify by affidavit to the court that the issued death warrant, whether execution by lethal injection as described in subsection 1A of this section, is available. If the director certifies that lethal injection is available, the method of execution shall be lethal injection. If the director does not certify that lethal injection is available, fails to file a certification as required pursuant to subsection 2 of this section, or otherwise determines that lethal injection is unavailable, the method of execution shall be firing squad. If a court holds that lethal injection is unconstitutional or in its face or as applied, or otherwise determines that firing squad is a constitutionally required method of execution, the method of execution shall be firing squad. I can't see Brian standing in front of a firing squad, guys. I really can't. The Department of Idaho's, the director of the Idaho's Department of Correction shall determine the procedures to be used in any execution. The provisions of this section shall apply to all executions carried out on or after the effective date of the enactment, irrespective of the date sentence was imposed. The Idaho Supreme Court has ruled that the word any in what is now subsection 6 refers to each and every person to be executed as an individual. Rather than a broad policy for all defendants, see Pizzuto versus IDOC, the court held that because of the legal issues with the manner of execution, the director of the IDOC must provide each individual to be executed with the procedures that will be used in their case in advance of the execution, so they may be reviewed and challenged. ID at 98. Thus, one condemned to die in Idaho has no real way to know how they will be killed. And they are killing an innocent man here. At least until the death warrant is issued. Still, as things stand, Idaho has no viable method for killing Mr. Kohberger. Exactly right, AT. No viable method for killing Mr. Kohberger. Up until 1978 in Idaho, death was imposed by hanging. Kathy Hill hanged, A History of Idaho's Executions from 2010. The actual structure of hanging was changed more than once because of the difficulty of getting necks to snap as desired, leading to a lack of immediacy in execution. The last man hanged by the people of Idaho was Raymond Snowden on October 18, 1957. Precisely why Idaho gave up on hanging has no simple explanation. Perhaps the guards telling stories of the sounds of the trap door being tested repeatedly in the presence of the doomed man made people feel uncomfortable while the whole ordeal. Maybe it was the idea of strapping a man on a board and wheeling him off to kill him with a bag over his face. Whether it was the how is relatively simple in 1978 as Idaho legislature tried to devise ways to kill people. Gee guys, that's nice to know. Idaho tried to devise ways to kill people that would satisfy the demands of the United States Supreme Court. Senators John Risch and Mike Black joined forces to amend the law to require lethal injection. The senators both claimed lethal injection would be more humane, even though we've heard stories that lethal injection is not humane. A lot of people think, lethal injection is just basically euthanizing a person like you euthanize an animal. Senate Judiciary and Rules Committee minutes, February 16, 1978, when the bill proposed to the House Judiciary, Rules and Administration Committee, Warden Anderson appeared in support of the bill by indicating that it was the desire of the Board of Corrections to take the circus atmosphere out of executions. Well, there still is certain circus atmosphere in execution. He said that there are weird people who show up at executions and contribute to the circus atmosphere. That still happens today, guys. February 27, 1978, it's unclear where Warden Anderson was encountering these circus-like executions, giving the last one in 1957 as described above was far from it. However, the new humane method of killing people immediately ran into problems. Yep. Bond and Miller of the Department of Corrections explained to the House Judiciary Committee, Rules and Administration Committee, just 4 years later, a medical prescription is required to obtain lethal injection. When a medical doctor or a medically trained person must administer the injection, the prison officials have been unable to find a medically trained person who would carry out such injections. Gee, I wonder why, guys. There's a lot of people out there who don't want to partake in the killing of other people by lethal injection or firing squad. The Department of Corrections and the Idaho Medical Association tried to reach a compromise so that killing could happen. Wow. The firing squad was included essentially as a backup, and the one drafter of the bill thought was likely unlawful. This was the original birth of the firing squad in 1982, permitted the director to use the firing squad whenever lethal injection was impractical. The only directive provided for the firing squad was that the director would decide its members. The original firing squad, however, never got off a shot. In 2009, the firing squad was repealed with a statement of purpose that read, "This proposed legislation will further amend Idaho Code Section 19-2716, the eliminate death by firing squad as an alternative method of execution. The elimination of the alternative method of death by firing squad is deemed appropriate in light of the United States Supreme Court opinion Bays v. Rees, in which the court concluded that a humane lethal injection protocol does not constitute cruel and unusual punishment." Yes, it does. There is no similar execution would constitute cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the Eighth Amendment. In addition, Idaho is one of the only states that have the firing squad as a method of execution. The rarity of the method of execution could form the basis of an Eighth Amendment claim. Elimination of the firing squad option will allow the state to avoid such challenge. So they're just one any way to kill Brian, basically. If they got rid of the firing squad in 2009, why'd they bring it back? Is because they can't get a hold of the drugs for the lethal injection, because there's a lot of states now that are being denied the lethal injection drugs because a lot of people feel that lethal injection is cruel and unusual punishment. Yeah, I will say yeah to that. The reasoning was taken from the statements of then Deputy Attorney General Bill Von Tagen and Senior Deputy Attorney General Lamont Anderson. House Judiciary Rules and Administration Minutes, February 11, 2009. This brings up to this year when Lamont Anderson, now lead Deputy Attorney General for the Capital Litigation Unit, returned to the legislature to ask for the firing squad back. Really? Wow. Senate Judiciary and Rules Committee minutes, March 13th, 2023. The majority of the gloss up never referred to the firing squad as a quick and painless, except when it quoted Justice Sotomayor's dissent, quoting Sotomayor dissenting at 977. It seems clear from the opinion in gloss up that the majority was simply pointing out that the dissent view that all methods for execution prior to lethal injection had become unconstitutional was a distinction without difference from the view that it was time to simply stop killing people. Amen to that. We need to stop killing people. And no amount of Google can uncover experts from 1983 that thought shooting people was humane. In fact, Coleman McCarthy wrote an article called Killing with Kindness in 1983 that would seem to dispel the idea that was the heyday of firing squads. The Washington Post, June 11, 1983. Idaho does not have the ability to kill a man with an injection at this point in time, likely will not in the future. This is because of three things: a lack of trained medical personnel willing to take a life, the difficulty in finding drugs that kill without creating unnecessary pain, and three, the difficulty of purchasing those drugs that have been held to be appropriate for killing a person by the courts. Amen to that. They're so eager to kill Brian. What's he done? They say he murdered 4 people. I don't see that at all. He's been tricked, he's been trapped, and he's being set up. And it just makes me sick to my stomach that they're doubling down on the death penalty for him when right there Ann Taylor says the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment. And they took away the firing squad, and the same guy that wanted it taken away in 2009 went back in 2023 and asked for it back. Well, gee, I wonder why. Brian was arrested in 2022, and all of a sudden, this guy goes back to the uh, to the to the House, to the legislature, and asks for the firing squad to be reinstated, and they do it. Gee, it makes you wonder. It really does. Well, like always, guys, like, subscribe, and comment on my channel. Hit that bell notification for any new uploads, and I hope you guys have a good weekend. This is Robert with True Crime Podcast, and I'm out. Peace.
Stop us, fly at 'em like choppers. Better cook those risks, cold butter my fists, we fire starters. One out of a million Marine show sights. Always get a feeling that I won't deny.